All right, today we welcome Gil Lara, Chief Creative Officer and co-founder at Sprout Social. With nearly 15 years at Sprout Social, Gil built an in-house design team, shaped the brand, and fostered a culture of creativity and caring deeply at the leading social media management platform. Gil's journey began in hands-on event and exhibit design at Freeman in Las Vegas. He took a leap of faith, moving to Chicago to join Sprout Social's founding team, where he helped establish design's influence in SaaS, which was uncommon for 2010. He showed that designers could have a seat at the table all the way from the start. And outside of work, Gil's creative pursuits blend into his personal life. He's a fan of the filmmakers like Adam McKay, Martin Scorsese, and sometimes he actually channels those into video projects, including a hype video for his firstborn, which as a dad, I think is incredible. He and his wife enjoy real estate projects together, and he's shared family culinary traditions at work, like cooking demos that he'll do. And during paternity leave, he even authored a children's book, My Hip Hop Story. Gil, it's awesome to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, man. This is fun. I appreciate you having me.
I can't wait. I got to check out this My Hip Hop Story, I think, after this. Is this a book that's like published and I can go find?
It's published and ready to go. It hasn't had the sales and marketing plan that it deserves, but it was something that just came out of a passion project between me and an artist buddy of mine. And before we knew it, we had a book that was that definitely stands out. It's a really cool book for all ages.
What's the most random object you've ever used for design inspiration, or most recent one?
Just got back from a trip. We did an international trip, and those are great for inspiration in general. And something that I saw that I took a picture of is so silly and so specific, but something like hardware for a shower, like the actual controls, and how just not just the aesthetics, but it was really about the defaults that were there that struck me as like, oh my God, I got to remember this. Not just for like the next time I have a real estate project and we're doing shower stuff and all that, but also just in general, just a good reminder of like, the simplicity matters, and that, default controls mean a lot. Right. And so it was positioned in a way where it's not going to, the faucet part's not going to be pointing at the user or whatever. Right. And then it always defaults to the certain shower head. So I was just like, oh man, what a great piece of inspiration. That's just, and those are things you find when you're just out in the world, unexpected.
It seems kind of odd to me though. I've never found a shower control that actually helps you permanently set a preference for the temperature. Like I get in every time, I go exactly to the same spot. Did this have anything like that?
Oh yeah, you got to level up, man. Those are definitely there.
Oh, okay.
Let it forget it, and then if you have shower for two people, it could have like preference on each, So.
Oh man. Okay, I feel like I'm years behind. It sounds like. So how did you, like looking back, early Gil starting his career out? I'd love to know a little bit about first how you got into design, and what became, and like what made you realize it was something you might want to do every day.
Well, going really early, I'm from Southern California, and I was influenced by a lot of the urban art. So I got into a little bit of graffiti, and that was, my definition of the art world at the time. That ended up opening some different doors for me, getting into like mural making, street art, things like that. But then it just kind of kept going, right? I got involved in this program where I learned a lot about screen printing and photography and press, and then did all the digital stuff that came. So, what I found is that as I continue to chase the sort of arts, it just kind of keeps unfolding, right? And so went through a whole chapter of doing event design and now software design, and there's going to be much more ahead. This whole children's book thing I told you, it's like different forms of channeling design and art, and finding ways to kind of, help users and make a dent in the universe.
It is doing graffiti a little bit like Fight Club, where you're not supposed to ask about graffiti. Is there a lot of experiences you had where you're kind of like, oh, I'm gonna tag this thing, or was this more traditional, like you found a canvas? Like how did that work?
Different forms. Like it's funny, if I'm doodling to myself during a phone call, you could still see it. It's still there, and then it's something where there's everything from the tagging, but there's so many different facets of it. What you can do with a can, what you can do with aerosol art, whether that's canvases or large installations on walls. And there's a whole community of people behind this. And I recently discovered on a VR app, there's an app where people are reconnecting and doing street art in the virtual world. It's a great way to connect with other artists.
Oh, wow. So like you can put the VR headset on and then you can either, go out and spray paint whatever medium, and then you can kind of see and watch other people or their work. Yeah. Or what's that like?
Yeah, you can collaborate on pieces with people live. You can work on a piece. I was working on a piece with somebody from Poland, just having a conversation, sharing tips. Cool. Is definitely an unexpected way to level up your game when you think about doing something on large scale, layering your paints, picking up stuff from different cultures and regions. Incredible.
When did you start transitioning from being a street artist or a little more casual into something that was a big project or something that you were maybe more excited about, that helped you develop this sense of maybe I'll be a designer, maybe that's the direction I want to go?
Yeah, I think once I realized that there was a commerce aspect and a business side and real demand for the arts, I got involved in this graphic arts program in my hometown, which really changed everything for me. There was a gentleman who ran this shop. So it was kind of like an after school program. This guy was kind of like a sensei master type that knew just a lot about everything, and learned how to use a Heidelberg press, like an old press, learned about screen printing, lithography. Like at the time, Photoshop 3.0 was available on a computer in the corner of the room, but he was adamant about saying, hey, you got to go into the dark room and develop your own film and learn how to dodge and burn, and then you can use Photoshop 3. And that was a crash course, and that opened up local jobs and places that I worked at in my hometown to just get my foot in the door. Starting at the bottom, working at a print shop, making deliveries, doing bindery, cutting business cards, and then just continued to chase it from there. And the opportunities kept coming.
Well, why do you think he was, you mentioned he's sort of like a Mr. Miyagi sensei master. Why do you think that he had this thought of start with the physical before you go to the digital? What was the sort of thinking there, if you could ever discern it?
Just having a deep appreciation for what it takes and understanding the essence of it, right? And at one point there was a tool in Photoshop called dodge and burn, and somebody who never has done actual photography may not even know what that means, but it's actually a method where you hold your hand in front of the lens and on the light and controlling exposure manually. And so those are things that you pick up when you get the tactile hands-on and the appreciation for it. I think it fosters great work, really, when you have that deep understanding and can see all of it. That's what I'd like to think. He never explained that to me, but I just did what he said, and it served me well.
Okay, I love that. That's awesome. So you started this shop, learned all these different tools, resources. Did you eventually get into Photoshop and start spending more time there, or did you still spend heavy amounts of time in the physical world, even at that store?
It quickly shifted. The big opportunity for me and the first big life change I had was when I had an opportunity in Las Vegas where the conference and trade show industry was booming. And so there was a company called Freeman that was running digital print, giant inkjet printers 24/7 to support all the mega shows that were happening around the early .com days. And so it wasn't just tech conferences, it was conference of every single industry. If there's going to be a conference or trade show, that was the capital for it, right? And so what I had to offer was just knowing just enough to be dangerous to run the printers, and then as a result, spent a lot of time in programs like Photoshop and Illustrator and things like that. But I would look at all the artwork that was coming in and say, God, who's designing this stuff? If the designers just knew a little bit about some production knowledge, I could level up their game. And that was actually the thing that led to me joining the design team, was offering that as my currency to them, saying like, hey, I could show you a thing or two about how to increase some efficiencies when we get the artwork. And so we did like a really great exchange of knowledge. And then I spent the next several years learning about all kinds of design, right? It wasn't just the signs and the graphic designs. It was started getting into structural design in 3D software and AutoCAD drafting, things like that. So I really started to expand my, my definition of design, going from like small world, small town, graffiti, to all of a sudden just seeing this much larger universe that I didn't even know existed, right? And it kept me in it for years. I stayed at Freeman for many years, just learning and growing, and yeah, it was a great place for it.
You mentioned that you kind of, as a form of currency, you brought some of the kind of trade craft skills that you had developed to this team. Do you ever find that they either weren't appreciative or weren't open to the young guy kind of suggesting the new way, or were they generally like the types who were like, "Hey, that's awesome"?
I'll always remember the manager at the time who was able to facilitate those conversations in a respectful way, right? Because I was like, once I did join the design team, I was definitely the youngest person on the team, but I was hungry, I feel like I approached those conversations respectfully, right? I feel that it helped because they had something to teach me. It felt like it was mutual, right? And so, yeah, I'm grateful for people like Greg who were able to do that.
That's awesome. So you got a really deep dive into this sort of physical world, learning all the skills, and then eventually, you're helping build Sprout Social, and so you've been building this product, this platform for like 15 years. After 9 years in event design, I know you mentioned that there's a lot of things that you can kind of bring between the two worlds, but what like starkly defines or differentiates these two worlds, where you kind of feel like you maybe had to grow into and work towards one versus leaving the other, or do you always just kind of live in both?
Yeah, it's quite a shift to make when you spend several years designing in large scale IRL experiences. You're working even just like your color environment. You're working in CMYK, not RGB, right? Those are two totally different worlds. But I think that at one point I definitely felt like I'd spent so many years in print and in IRL that I felt so behind in catching up with digital experiences, and like touch devices were coming and all of that. But I had some people around me, my co-founders, that really pumped me up and helped me believe that I could learn it just by doing, just diving in and taking also the unique perspective of not having all of the constraint and all the baggage, and just saying, hey, why don't we just do it like this, right? And so I think there were definitely some things that at the time where I just took directly from print and applied them to the early, minimalist approach that we had when we formed Sprout, the early versions. And it was definitely designed by somebody who partially didn't know what they were doing, but was, hungry enough to keep learning. And more importantly, hiring people around me that really knew it well so that I could learn from them. And that was the real key to growth over the past like several years, this whole time.
Can you talk a little bit about the sort of formative story, at least for you? I think you mentioned, you got in your car and basically drove to Chicago. Like, what was that like? And why did you decide to do that? That's a big change. You're moving to a new city. Love to hear more about that.
Yeah, the first time I made a wild move like that, it served me really well, right? Going from Bakersfield with nothing and hopping on a Greyhound bus to just start a new career and an exciting new job in Las Vegas. And then several years go by, here I am in my 20s, later 20s, but I was like, I still have the ability to make moves, right? And I'd visited Chicago a few times. One of my smarter friends lived in Chicago, somebody that was definitely worth hanging around, and I got a lot of energy from, who is Justin, my co-founder and CEO for many years. And so one of the times I left Chicago when I was visiting, I said, well, next time I come back, I'll be living here. And it was like, okay, I'll believe it when I see it. But I remember him being supportive too, like sending links to, some places and things like that to make it a little bit more real. And then before I knew it, I told my employer, I said, you know what, I think I need to go to Chicago. I don't really have a really good reason other than just to change it up again. I'll either get a new job out there or I'll be happy to take this one on the road. And at the time, they didn't have a lot of people working from home at all. So I was one of the first, and they trusted me to take the job on the road, packed up one car full of stuff, moved to Chicago because I felt like I just needed a change of pace. And it was a great opportunity to be able to do that. I'm so glad they trusted me to do that because over the next few years, it was like Yes, we were working on our day jobs, but nights and weekends, we had a fire in our belly to create something new. And at the time, there were a lot of app developers experimenting with the Twitter API and things like that, coming up with different ways to bring value to the market. And in our case, there was at one point when people asked me like the founding story from a designer's perspective, I was actually in Las Vegas. I would travel back to Las Vegas. I was opening up a mega show, and Justin calls me on my Nextel, and he's like, "All right, we need to kind of really put all of our energy on this social inbox. That's where it's at. Let's stop all the other experiments and go hard on the social inbox." I said, "Okay." So I fly home the next day. I come home. He has created a lot. He was really excited about this idea that we had kind of been tinkering with and pushed it along. But right away, I saw that it needed a designer's touch, right? and that was always my my currency at the time. It was just like anything that my business counterpart needs, I have so much value to offer, whether it's like helping name the company, securing the domain, figuring out our first logo, and getting a business card done, getting the V1 of the product done, iterating on new features, staying back home and working with the other co-founders while the other two travel to go get funding, like just deep in it and putting all of my energy toward that. And then, slowly one by one, everybody started focusing 100% of their time on the product, which is super inspiring. Starting with Justin, he was the first one that quit his day job, which sent quite the signal to the rest of us. And I'll always be grateful.
You mentioned, I think when we talked earlier, that there was a sort of a time where, as you guys were maybe building more of the office, that you were able to kind of go back to your roots and sort of like design the office in a physical way and think about some of the, whether it's AutoCAD or whatever the software was, but like, what was that like for you? What was it, were you like so excited to get back to some of that?
Yeah. For the first few years, it was really figuring out product design, marketing funnel, all the core things that you need to run a digital business, right? And then you start building out a team, and you start building out an organization, right? You're hosting events. You have a space that you have to live in. We're moving from out of the incubator sort of that we were in, that our investors help us get into like a real office where we had a clean slate. And so it was like, oh, I've kind of been in similar territory before. I can help with some of these designs, and I can get back into AutoCAD. I can kind of do a few of these things. And that was really fun to be able to take a creative brand designer on my team under my wing and show them how to do large scale and how to build something that really is a reflection of the brand, because I'd done things like this. I hadn't done a lot of like commercial spaces ever, but it was adjacent to it and a really cool opportunity. And those things just kept coming. Like I said, doing big events, there was definitely some of those full circle moments, including hiring local artists to come in and do a meaningful mural that meant something to our team, and partnering with them on that. So yeah, those full circle moments were quite beautiful and satisfying.
Going back a little bit to the social inbox, yeah. When you guys first started, was it all Twitter? Was this trying to connect a bunch of different tools to sort of have an omnibox? What was the approach there?
Yeah, if you remember, around the time 2009, 2010 is when we officially started. Twitter was on its way up, right? As a lot of the headlines were kind of like the microblogging platform, and some people were saying, "What are you going to say in 140 characters, and why does it matter?" And then celebrities were grabbing handles, and certain businesses were grabbing handles, and that was our big thing: is every business should be on social, right? And at the time, also we integrated Yelp early on to kind of show that context of like, okay, you're a business, plug in your Yelp, plug in your Twitter account. And then if you remember, a lot of the location-based services started coming out. So we absolutely integrated with Foursquare, right? Gowalla was one of them at the time, and really starting to get the location aspect of it. And at the time, some guys in our 20s, we spent a lot of time in bars and restaurants, so we were thinking a bit about small business, but it was really interesting to expand out of those use cases and start to see what agencies were doing in social, and the big opportunity in enterprise, of course.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the customer development and some of the customer experiences that you've had over the years, as you started to build this product. So, for example, like when I worked at Facebook, we had phrases on the wall. One was feedback is a gift, and Sheryl Sandberg talked about that a lot. I imagine that over the years you've gotten a lot of feedback. We talked about your experience with Freeman and kind of working with those guys. You get feedback from your team, your customers. I've worked with lots of designers. Some of them I think take feedback really well and sort of listen and hear it. Others, there's no way that they're going to hear that feedback. How do you receive feedback? What's it like for you? How do you approach using the feedback, especially? I think that's the critical part.
Yeah. I firmly believe and continue to believe that when it comes to feedback and data gathering, is that you should use it as an input, a strong one, but it is still an input, because you have to blend that with everything else that you know about your business, or everything that you should know about your business, right? And so you can't just take the feedback and apply it straight to the thing that you're working on, right? I really do think that it's more important to be able to learn how to filter it, learn how to find the deeper meaning in it, learn how to be patient and absorb a lot of pain, right? I remember those times we would do a big customer survey and sit down and just read all the feedback kind of coming in and be like, oh, this is grueling, but we have to feel that pain, right? Because at the end of it, we'll have a deeper insight. Something will strike. It's a big motivator to innovate. It's a big motivator to put something out there to kind of help. So I'm talking about feedback in the context of customer feedback, but when it comes to feedback amongst individuals and helping one another, I think feedback coming in is really has to be seen as something that is kind, right? If you can get to that point, if you can get to that honesty and break through it, if you can make it clear, if you can make it actionable, if you can make it specific, if you can, let people know that it's just feedback, it's to help improve, right? And if you could break through that, that's transformative. If you could really get to those things and have a team that is really having strong feedback loops.
There are a lot of tools now. You mentioned surveys, and other tools like meeting recording, Gong, whatever it is. Or I should say whatever tool you use there. But there's lots of ways to pull the feedback in, as well as obviously just like taking a Zoom call or a Google Hangout and just like talking to the customer, going to meet in person. What's your favorite or preferred way? I mean, I'm sure you like to get lots of different avenues of feedback, but like, what's been your biggest aha moments? Has it been surveys? Has it been in person? Is it conferences, talking to customers directly?
Lately, it's been sitting down with the customer, looking them in the eye and feeling their pain. There's nothing more motivating than that, right? So there have been a few of those moments recently where you got to sit down with a big customer and really hear what they have to say. Something that we thought was so great, the enhancements that we're making, but didn't realize the little bit of friction that we introduced, or just how much change that provides to their workflow by that just a little bit of extra friction that was maybe an oversight, and you get something like that fixed right away.
And what happens when you start to find that your customers either directionally they want something hyper specific, and you're kind of trying to figure out what the right feature product is there to build? How do you kind of balance those things?
Yeah, sometimes it's a bit of a journey, right? Like being able to kind of absorb that over time and having a good mix of that quantitative data that you're always looking at, but then the qualitative by talking to customers, reading surveys, all that stuff. And then just living in your business and, having your convictions and putting stuff out that you believe in, right? And so one thing that I think of, as I think about like all these really dense RFPs and these features that exist today, I go back to several years ago. There was this way that we had the ability to communicate directly with our customers inside of the product, right? And we had this like messenger that would be this bar that would flash. And so Justin, our CEO, would occasionally go in there and be able to say something to all the customers. And there was something where when these big catastrophes, these world events would happen, like a 9/11, or in this case it was Boston Marathon. We have customers that have stuff scheduled in our platform, and we want to be thinking on their behalf and say, hey, you might want to reconsider your scheduled messages right now, consider pausing them or things like that, just to be considered for what's going on in the world, right? And at the time, that was just something that we did, right? That was something that we believed in. We turned something that we believe in into just putting it out in the world and advising customers. And when we did that, we had some, a lot of praise and thank yous from our customers for helping them that way. And it was like, oh, that's a feature right there. That's something that we should build, is something where you can kind of like pause messages system wide. And we talked about different ways of doing it. And we started working on it. And then fast forward, later on, the market caught up. And, that's a feature that's now, like I said, on RFPs. It's like, do you have this particular thing, right? And, it's fun to be on the side where you're able to see the trend, take something that's of value to what you believe, right? As a software developer, as a founder, and make it real, put it out in the world, and doing that before the market's begging for it, before it's turned into something that's just cookie cutter, right? So you get the opportunity to shape them in a way that has some heart and soul in it, and has some intention that's really a reflection of the brand, a reflection of the company. So that's one that comes to mind when I think about, having convictions and having those convictions turn into actual features.
I love the convictions turning into features. The CEO, pause all messaging kind of dialogue. That seems, when I think about even just for today, most of the products that we use, I don't know, even the email tools, they don't have these kinds of sophisticated pause all. And I'm just thinking about over the years, how many times companies have kind of gotten themselves in sort of maybe uncomfortable, odd places because they tweeted at the wrong time inadvertently. And, there was no like offense necessarily intended, but had they had this feature, it would have been great. So yeah, I can see where that would be very smart. So that's a very great example. I love it.
And on that note, I think that the number one way to kind of be at the forefront of that is just using your product, like having a use case in your own product that you're developing, and finding the use cases on your own, and you will find stuff that you're passionate about. You should, right? And when I think about some of the early things that we built, it was a nascent market. There were only a few players that were doing what we were doing. So when it comes to a social media scheduler, the features that we were building, it was just, what do we want, right? There should be a way to just kind of throw something into the queue and have it, live without all the complexity of picking a certain date. And I remember how we figured that out. And then I remember seeing a competitor, their take on it later, and then the market demands it, right? It's just like a checkbox now. So use the product, right? And another piece is just, if you're an early adopter of any tech or product, that's a great way to catch it as well, right? When one that I think of is we have social reports inside of the platform, and the common way several years ago was exporting as a PDF or sending it over email, or to schedule a series of emails to always deliver the PDF. If you're using other products, you already see it's a share link, right? And that share link should be live. And we saw that coming a mile away. And so we started working on that before customers were asking for it. It was like, by the time it caught up, it was like, yes, we know this is exactly the way modern sharing happens.
You mentioned a few times this idea of like a checkbox, an RFP. I don't know about you, but sometimes when our customers request sort of either competitive features or features that I'm not as excited about, but they're maybe part of something that we ought to build. Did you find that, there's sort of a difference between like innovating or building with conviction and then just sort of doing things because you felt like you needed to just do them to have that? Did your soul die a little bit when you were designing and building those, or were you kind of just like, all right, it's just part of the business?
There's a lot of things that are just part of the business, especially in our line of business where we are connected. We have partnerships at all the big social networks, right? And those social networks have strategies of their own and other things that they're doing that impact, the platform partners, right? And so there's going to be changes that are made, and we have to be able to just take those changes, move on them. Sometimes those things are a value add for the customer, and we can proudly say, hey, we made the change quickly. Other times it's just non-glamorous work. And over the years, I watched our product teams anticipate this in our roadmaps, leaving a little extra padding for the inevitable, leaving a little extra bit padding for just the things that are going to happen. And it's cool to see how much we've matured around that, anticipate it, turn it into a strength.
Right. Yep. I like the idea of leaving some room for the inevitable. So when you look back at the beginnings of your career as a designer versus now, what's changed? What's similar? And what would you give advice to yourself?
Yeah, it's changed a lot, right? And especially crossing over from one industry to another. But the thing that comes to mind for me is that the definition of design in organizations, it varies by quite a bit, right? It could vary by large degrees. So what I say to people is that, like, if you're not defining what design is at your organization, someone else will define it for you, right? And so at a certain point, we just made sure that we were a part of onboarding, telling each person, each cohort, hey, this is how we think about design at this particular company. You might come from a company in which design is doing the thing at the end and making it pretty. We're a company where we partner early, and design can impact anything. If you partner early and think about the use cases and follow the process, deeply empathize, understand people, workflows, use cases, then build something really great. And so for me, I've learned that by just being in design for years and years and years, right? And so even my own definition of design has evolved over the years, that it's all these other things now. It's a practice that runs pretty deep, right? And when I think about the lessons in that, because it is so sophisticated and runs pretty deep, and everybody has a different definition of design, you have to really check yourself when you show up at the table as a designer, how you want to show up. Do you want to show up as a people pleaser designer and just do what the partner is asking for in a very one-to-one direct way? Or do you want to show up with some opinions and ask people to take a minute to zoom out and really try to understand the deeper problem that we're trying to solve? That's a hard thing to do. It takes a lot of nerve. And, to be honest, in my career, I've erred more toward the side of being a people pleaser designer, because I want to be liked. I want people to like to work with me, right? I want to earn.
Yep.
What it's done for me is it allows you to earn trust, so that when you have something that you're really serious about, some strong convictions, you have the room. They'll listen to you, right? Because they know that you are also a designer that can just get shit done, right? And if you can do that, you really prove yourself, and then you earn the spot to kind of say, let's zoom out. So I as much as I want to do that all the time, I think you kind of have to do both. You have to know when to kind of play each card. And my advice to myself is, I would have been, just in my career, more opinionated, more assertive, rock the boat more. I think that you ultimately lead to better outcomes when you do that, and it's your duty to do that. There's a thing called healthy tension, and anytime teams are working with designers, they should especially realize that healthy tensions exist, and that's okay. That's a part of building something great.
Yep, I would 100% agree with the healthy tension aspect of things. I think over the years, I've worked with sales and marketing, and there's always some tension between those two teams. They need more leads. They need to close the leads. Product and engineering, it's like, we want to ship it faster. Well, we want it to be perfect or stable or reliable or beautiful. There's all these sorts of things that you're always having to balance, which is tough. And I think that's one of the best parts about being, in the role that you are, where you get to take ownership and taking an opinion to build these great products. So yeah, 100% agree with that. That's great. So what about, thinking about your suggestion to be maybe more opinionated? Just going way back, actually, when you drove out to Chicago, were you yet married? And do you think if you hadn't been married, would your wife have been like, yeah, let's do that? Or do you think she would have thought you're crazy?
I found the right one that was willing to just be adventurous and roll with it and go with the flow. But yeah, I think a big part of making that decision was that I had the independence, right? We didn't have to overthink it. I didn't have like a whole family to think about. I really could just do one car full of stuff and move across the country. But fortunately, once I made it to Chicago, within a year, I had met my wife. Within the next 6 months after that, we had started Sprout. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. She's also a designer, and we had mentioned earlier that we work on some projects together, and it's really cool working with her because we see totally different things. Like, we'll approach something and I care way more about how it functions, and she's going to spend the time looking very closely at samples and materials and color chips and things like that I just don't always see. So together we end up doing some pretty great work together.
Oh, that's awesome. Again, probably that healthy tension, right? Like you find ways to make something incredible while, sweating the details.
Yeah.
Let's see. So when Gil is not building, building a family, building Sprout Social, what are some of your favorite ways to think about, learn about, stay relevant, and continue to find ways to level up your expertise in design?
Well, number one, when I think about like where I spend time on my own social networks, like I love like a YouTube wormhole. Like that is a great place where you can just follow the algorithm, of course, but I like taking charge of it and being like, this week we're going to go on a Brian Chesky tear, or if you want to revisit some Steve Jobs or some Scott Belsky, like that's there for you. I love doing stuff like that. And you could watch that stuff, but for me, I'm an auditory learner, and I think it's a really great time for auditory learners where you can just kind of have something that you can pop in one ear and go do something and multitask. So I get a ton of energy from stuff like that. And there's been a handful of podcasts out there that have been giving me a lot of energy as well. So a lot in the ears, but the cliche is true also about just getting out and just change up your environment and go do things, right? Could be as simple as just agreeing to go out to dinner, which sometimes my wife would have to tear me away because I'm so obsessed with all the work I'm doing. And it's like, let's do dinner. And then you go out to dinner and you get inspired by something, you have a great conversation or whatever, right? And but it could be as large as an international trip, and those are just littered with all kinds of inspiration, which I talked about earlier, right? And I think about the time I was able to give a meaningful talk in the organization about accessibility, only because I had experienced the subway system in Tokyo that was full of all kinds of inspiration in a very real way that can fuel, all kinds of experiences, and really a differentiator for Sprout when we think about what we're trying to do for like this idea that accessibility is for everyone.
Just thinking about the subways in Japan, I lived there for a few years when I was very young, and my mom, I don't remember this very well, but my mom always remembers kind of being like gently pushed to fit into the subways because they were so well used. And so, but that's an incredible system. So I think that's a great place to look for inspiration on how you can do things in a way that's very different than the US or Europe or otherwise.
And to be specific, the kinds of things we're talking about here is like the unique jingle that each train has, or like the idea that if you follow the sound, it leads, the trickling water leads to the restrooms, or the birds chirping will like lead you to outside. And these are for people that have, limited abilities, but they're also for everyone. They make the whole experience delightful, right? So I always thought that was such a cool thing. And when you travel to different places, you see the degree and the level of intention of design in varying degrees, right? And when I was in Japan, I saw a lot of really cool inspiration like that.
So you have this, like, sometimes you're very intentional about these wormholes on YouTube. Others, it's sort of dinner or international trips. Do you find that, like, when you visit a new place like Tokyo, you kind of have to take the headphones off and you really have to be in the moment to see all these things? Because it's so easy to be distracted, right? I assume that's a big part of being a designer.
Absolutely, right? You got to know kind of when you want to insulate yourself, So I do find myself, when I'm in my routines is when I'm very much in my ears, but when I'm out of my routines, I try to be present, right?
Yeah, very cool. Okay. So let's see. You mentioned a couple great leaders, Scott Belsky, Brian Chesky. So, Brian is, like you, one of the early founders of his business, Airbnb, and you at Sprout. And in his case, he's a designer by background, as are you. So you kind of come from a different perspective, like you mentioned, trying to have new hires go through these onboarding steps and hear about how design influences and is important within the organization. What do you feel like?
All employees, by the way, not just
all employees.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's great. That's even better. What do you feel like have been some of the biggest advantage of this, and kind of maybe also being at a position of, I don't know if you want to call it privilege, power, respect, authority. What have you done with this role that you're proud to kind of talk about or share?
Yeah, I think I probably touched on some of them here, but to be like very specific is, I talked about the accessibility thing, like having somebody in the organization to really champion accessibility. If you have a design leader who's looking at all that stuff, like that's, a great a great way to kind of have somebody catch that and make it a differentiator. We've done other things that, you know, all companies should do at some point, which is figure out how to scale design and build a legit design system. That's something that we've done. We've built something called Seeds, which it's not just for, you know, the product. It really is this larger design system. It talks about the meaning of why things are the way they are. It points to resources. So whether you're somebody who is like coding and looking for a code snippet or a certain type of component, or you're somebody like on the front lines, you know, customer facing work, like it's all there, right? And that's a really good design system would cover all of it. So we've been able to do things like that. But I think the thing that's been really cool that and unique is when you start figuring out, okay, if you're at the helm of design in an organization, what are all the interesting things you can point design and creative resources to that are typically not getting it, right? If a design discipline is nested in one particular part of the org. And for us, it was like really thinking about the employer brand, thinking about the workplace and the employee experience, right? There's so much opportunity there. And each time that we've put a little bit of energy toward it, it's given us all this runway. And you talk about what makes a company special. Well, you know, if you can capture the soul of it and express it with a team of creative people and really allow people to see the personality of the company, the brand of the company, you know, and there's so much richness and there's so much to work with, right? And so I think that being able to kind of take the time and take some cycles and bring that to life has been huge, right? I think of a time where, you know, we were in between hiring like a marketing officer. We didn't really have anybody at the helm really pushing us and pushing the brand several years ago. We do now. We have an incredible CMO named Scott. But several years ago, there was a little bit of a lull, and, you know, I wanted the designers to feel inspired. So we took a couple of days and did kind of like a brand jam or like a swag jam. And it allowed us to just expand on, you know, the brand personality and come up with these different experiments and expressions, right? So because we felt like we are more than just power social media software. Like, you know, we want to capture the essence of that. What else is true about us? So one of the designers made a little sticker that said always be growing, you know, not thinking much of it. That became a huge mantra. And if you go visit our headquarters in Chicago, it stands as a large, you know, 12-foot sign and that people really, that means something to people. There's been programs named after it. And it's like, if you take the time to fuel these programs and fuel your brand, it'll give you tons of runway and things that you can, you know, you can coast off of those things and really just gain a lot from it as an employer and as a company, as a brand.
You didn't really touch on it much, but, you know, I'd love to know a little bit more about video. So, you know, you highlighted early on that you built this, or you made this like hype video for your, you know, your kid. I would imagine that video as a medium is something that your company, you personally, you know, you think about all the social media content. It's so much video, right? Yeah. How has the introduction of video or content that infrastructure that could support it, or, you know, videos within your company, how have you guys used video over the years and personally, professionally?
Yeah, really great question, because it's something that I'm super passionate about. I remember in our earlier days, we would work with, you know, okay, we got to launch a product video. Let's work with an agency who has, you know, some video producers and motion folks. But I got really inspired by another company out there named Zendesk, who had an in-house video team. And I went and sat down with them, had lunch with them, talked to them about the benefits. And I said, you know what, this is what we're going to do. And so we built our video team, the start of it in 2015. And it was, talk about a total shift of what we were able to produce. Once you have somebody inside the organization who is living and breathing the culture, who understands the product on a deeper level and the evolution of that product, you know, we were starting to do all kinds of things with video. Not just sort of like the obvious like product launches and things like that, right? At one point we were on a tear for, you know, doing our annual kickoff and getting, you know, I have these very, you know, visceral memories and moments of everybody piling into an auditorium, the countdown, the anticipation, and then just playing like the most epic video you've ever seen, where people are laughing and crying and dancing and every emotion possible, and just having this real connection to the company that lasts for years, right? And, you know, that's one example of taking something like that and really activating it. And at the time, I remember that annual kickoff we would do, when we were very much in person, it would follow with like, oh, our holiday party is next week. Well, why don't we rebrand the holiday party to the annual kickoff party and carry all the energy into that? So we took all those same brand elements. We took, all the outtakes and slow-mo and B-roll. And when you would walk into this party, it would just be a live expression of the company as you know it. And nothing makes people happier than seeing their friends on screen being celebrated, being sometimes roasted. All those things, are really fun. And so learned a lot just by having some creative people around on the video team to really show what you can do. And it's, when I talk about learning inside of an organization, learned all of my video stuff at Sprout by the amazing video people that are there.
Awesome. I think it's so cool to, continue to show this important trait that you've demonstrated of progressively learning new mediums, new tools over the years, and just, learning from experts around you. I'd love to know, you've been working at Sprout a long time, right? And you've ridden multiple waves, social media, mobile has sort of like taken off, video, AI now. Tell us a little bit about, what you guys are working on at Sprout and what you're most excited about, either within Sprout or just externally in the design world over the next few years.
Totally. Okay. So at Sprout, shouldn't be surprised by this, but with the AI developments, we have really latched onto that, looking at everything that we do and being able to really enhance that. It's something that the market is demanding, but it's also something where, yes, we've had some of these, a feature set that's already been powered by some AI capabilities, but now we're just really supercharging that because the market is ready, right? And so when you think about every single thing, every aspect of Sprout, for those not familiar, right, Sprout is a social media management platform where you have, customer care suite that's there, people responding to messages. You have your marketing use case where you have scheduled messages in there, right? People reviewing, doing a message approval, things like that. Then you also have the analytics suite where people are doing deep dives on big data and, using that to fuel their, competitive intelligence or, product design, things like that. Not to mention some of the other tools that we have for employee advocacy, right? Or the influencer product that we recently acquired. So there's a pretty large, sprawling feature set at Sprout. So what happens when you take that, layer on what we call AI Assist to enhance every single function? It's like, this stuff was just, it's ripe for this, right? When you think about 10 years of the social data set that we have at our access to, when you're looking at a platform that's just processing so many records, billion messages or billion social records per day, right? And being able to really channel that and provide insights to customers that are actionable right from the start, right? And so every business function, there's something in there for everybody, right? When you think about sales teams or product development teams, or even, support teams, like I mentioned, customer facing teams, like this is a great way to drive revenue, customer satisfaction, of course, and even the product innovation side that I mentioned, right? That AI assist layer kind of channeling through the whole product is something that really enhances what we've always believed, right? Which is that every organization should be on social. Every organization, to their ability, should be engaging with their audience. And that can be a lot for organizations depending on what their audience size is and what their team size is, right? So when you think about having this platform in the middle of it, it just helps with the operational efficiencies and helps people tap into their more creative side and spend time doing the fun parts of social, because it can be a really fun place to operate, but at volume and at scale, it's pretty daunting. So this feature set is essential, and it's definitely an exciting time, as many other industries are seeing right now.
Yep. Yeah, I think AI, at least, from what I'm seeing, both with our customers, but also just personally, when I'm driving in the car and my kids ask me a question, I just turn on ChatGPT and talk. If I'm working on a blog post or a podcast, I can take all the content. Like, for example, after this call, I can take the transcript, I can create a blog post and social media content, and sort of endless amounts of ways you can be creative and communicate with your customers, which is really exciting. And I think it's pretty interesting too to think about like the volume that you guys are already at, which is significant. and then taking an opportunity to assist that. Sounds like it'll be great for you guys going into the future.
Absolutely great for our customers and for us as a business as well. Yeah, and the product is sprawling. Like I was trying to give you a quick overview, and it's like, oh, it keeps going. There's so many different parts of our product line. But yeah, I think every single one of them is being impacted. Every time I see something coming in from the product team, there's a new, prototype to review. There's a new technology being reviewed. It's pretty rapid. And with that said, to kind of speak to the second part of what you were asking, what else I'm excited about in the business is just figuring out ways to elevate how we're presenting the product, because we have this really cool problem in that, we don't have this place where we're trying to where we're showing concepts of things that can be, and we've nailed exactly how to show the product in its dream state. It's the opposite, where the product is maturing at such a rapid rate, and we have such a rich feature set and so many use cases to talk about, that it's a bit daunting for us. It's a bit overwhelming for us, to be honest, right? And so, I've spent a lot of time with the team just saying, okay, how can we break this down and tell a great story about this feature set here? And recently we put out a video for AI Assist that I'm super proud of, because it hits on all the things that I'm always talking about, of like more showing, less telling, right? The art of quickly conveying value in just such a concise way. You're thinking about every millisecond on screen as an opportunity to really showcase the product and do it justice and show the context of it. It can be a really overwhelming thing, but I think we're hitting a really cool frequency right now. It's also in this line of like, it's kind of entertaining. There's a vibe. It's fun. It's intriguing. Yeah, so that's an area that I've been spending time on, working with the team, just continuing to beat that drum, pointing to industry examples who are doing it really well. Companies like Canva, Figma, Slack is another one that we're always talking about. So I hope to be up there with the best of them next time we talk.
Sounds like a great strategy and plan for the future. So speaking of future, you've invested and devoted and put in an immense amount of great work with Sprout over the last 15 years, or almost 15 years. So, kind of what's the future look like for you, and what are you excited about?
Well, 15, if you count the year that we're bootstrapped, it's like nearly 15 years, right? And I'm at a point right now where, we were trying to get to that next step. We wanted to kind of rebuild our senior leadership team, bring in new perspective. We had to hire our CMO. We had to hire, a head of product for the first time. We have like a chief product officer who's incredible. Somebody named Erica who has this like incredible experience to bring to Sprout. All the founders, we've all kind of been taking a look at what we've been doing and thinking like, what's next for us? And in my case, over the past year, I have exercised something that in the industry we call giving away your Legos, right? So being able to take a creative team and building it from scratch to what it is today, ended up being like 35, 40 people, incredible people, and saying, you guys are marketers, please join Scott and the marketing team. And then taking, a product design discipline and saying, okay, let's consolidate here and join our partners in product management under, new perspective and new leadership. And so for the past year, I've been finding myself like, oh, I'm like a design co-founder guy who's still passionate about the business. I don't have any direct reports for the first time, which has been really just a new chapter, a new way of operating. But I think long-term, it's not something that I wanted to stay in. So I've kind of perfectly have started to find, the end of my run at Sprout. So come the end of this year, I'm calling it my wrap up, and I want to definitely leave on a strong note. There's so much that we've done. There's so much that I'm proud of. And I've always said that I don't want to stay too long and overstay my welcome. And over the past year, it's been very clear that, I have to take this as a cue, call it a strong run. And I can honestly look the new team in their eyes and say, I trust you with this. And I feel really good about what we're about to go do. It's an incredible time for anybody joining our company for sure. But I feel really proud to be one of the people that was brought it from 0 to 1. 0 to many, actually. I wouldn't just say 0 to 1. I don't know what the number is that we're at now, but if you're going to go employee count, we're at 1,400 and growing. And I just couldn't be more proud. And so for me, there's, I have no shortage of interests, and I'm in a very different place in my life now where I have different opportunities that I didn't have when I, packed a car full of stuff and moved to another city, moved across the country. Now it's, really paying attention to what's important to me, and starting with family and wellness and some areas that I have debt in, right, that I want to spend time in. And then also from there, I don't think I'll sit still very long. I can see myself starting to get, passionate about investing in various companies. There's definitely some great companies out there that I'm already tempted working with, joining some boards, things like that. But I think I'm going to try to pace myself here. There's instead of putting all the pressure on one particular business idea, because I'm not ready to retire. I think the next chapter, whenever I get back on the saddle, will be more of a series of experiments, right, in areas that I'm passionate about, and then figuring out where's the signal, and then maybe doubling down on that.
That sounds like congrats. That's an incredible run. And I think the best athletes, the best creators, eventually they either pass the reins or decide, hey, I'm going out on my terms at the best time. And that's great to hear for you. So I'm really excited for you. That sounds like a great plan.
Yeah. And like I said, I can honestly say that I feel really good about Sprout and our level of maturity, and even our design maturity, where, design is now embedded in every part of the organization. It's been a part of our founding story. There are certain practices, there are certain things that I don't even touch, and come back and see what they've become. And it's like, oh, this group is clearly leveraging a design thinking methodology, or a practice, or, it definitely has echoed, and we have some really strong people in the organization that are still carrying the torch. And it's still a great time to join, if anybody's interested at a company that has strong design in their DNA.
Sounds awesome. And how do we find Sprout? It's sproutsocial.com. What's the company domain now?
Yep, sproutsocial.com, and all the socials. You can find us. The team is constantly putting out content, engaging with our community. It's a team of just amazing, kind, big-hearted, high-performing people that I would encourage you to meet.
And how about if somebody wants to find you? Where do they find you? Are you invisible on social, or what's your approach there?
There was a few years where I was quiet, but I like the idea of coming out a little bit more and spending a little more time in the community. The channels you could probably find me on, or LinkedIn. I'll leave my info to you, as well as Instagram, I think, is a good place. LinkedIn and Instagram might be my couple too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Gil, it's been great talking to you today, and thanks for everything that you shared. It's been terrific.
Thanks so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
All right. See you.
All right. See you.